sorry, y'all. I've been waiting for this thing. No, it's still doing the thing. We are live. Hello, besties and bosses. I apologize. This keeps happening where I'm having challenges going live in the group, but then it seems to work after I tried a couple of times. If any of you have been having this as well, and you have any, like, I don't know if I need a different plug-in or something like that, or any hot tips, maybe I need to do an update. I'm on my laptop though. But if any of you all have any, and folks, I know most of us aren't going live in Facebook groups anymore, but some of us are grandma's dinosaurs like me and still doing that. So if you have any intel for me, I am always available for that because I want to be here for you to have these conversations. But okay, let us dive in. This is such an important conversation. This is one I'm honestly having with clients multiple times per week at every stage of business. So this is not just if you're a new business owner. This is I can think of multiple clients at the multi-six-figure level where we were having this conversation this week. And I think particularly right now with so much changing online so quickly all of the time, I think this is a question that comes up so much and it can be really confusing. So I want to walk through this with you, workshop this with you, and hopefully give you some three key things you can look at so you can really assess this in your own business. So we're going to talk about how to know if your strategy is working and when it's time to pick and stick, as people say. I'm sure you've heard that, the whole idea of like pick and stick with a strategy, when it's time to make a tweak, and when it is actually time to make a pivot for more sales, because a lot of times we do need to pick and stick, but sometimes we do need to make a tweak, and sometimes it really is time to pivot. I know I've definitely made those in my business, and I think it can be really confusing because these feel or can sound like conflicting ideas or conflicting concepts, but I think it's more understanding what the right problem to solve in your business is and going through that. So I'm going to go through all of that today. This and just so you know, we're going to dive into. So we're going to talk about how to know again when it's time to pick and stick, when it's time to make a tweak, when it's time to pivot for more sales. I'm going to talk about one of the most common patterns I see that can slow down your sales, even when it feels like you're showing up consistently, because showing up consistently is so important. And sometimes we're showing up consistently. Not to make anyone say that we're doing the wrong thing, but we're not showing up consistently in the way that creates results. We're going to talk about how to know when your strategy actually is not working, or when it might need one of three key things. So, of course, there can always be more, but there's really three key things I see that are indicators for us of what we need to do with our strategy. So we'll go through what those are, and then how to know when to make those changes. And then I just want to talk briefly at the end about why this is so important, and just this sneaky way that overworking and over strategizing can actually increase your expenses and cause some of those ups and downs, a feast and famine cycle in business that we are all trying to avoid, because we all want sustainability. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for my clients. As I go through this, if you have questions, if you want clarification on anything now or on the replay, please let me know, since I'm not coaching anyone individually. So happy to be as available for that as possible. If you watch this on the replay, just do me a favor and tag me in the comments. Sometimes this is the way the notifications are, because I get so many on Facebook. I don't always realize there's a message for me on these. And now that Facebook deletes these lives after a couple of weeks, I don't want to miss your question. So if you have one and you're watching on the replay, just tag me at Kim Margaret Singer. I'll make sure that I reply. And if you're listening to this in the vault, you can just always hit reply to an email if you have a question. Very, just give me a second to reply, but very happy to be as helpful as possible with that. Okay, so this came up, I think you've probably heard me talk about this before, but I think one of the most challenging things in business, and not just seasons or phases, but I think this is just happening all the time in business, is what I call the gap phase. And it's really the time from which you get clear on what you want, get clear on the strategy you're going to execute on, and actually start executing consistently from when your results actually start showing up. And that period in between, right, that clarity of what the thing is, the strategy is, that, and what we want, that clarity on that, and then when we actually start implementing to when we start getting results, there's almost always a lag. What is it, the Warren Buffett quote? I feel like I use this all the time, and I should actually memorize it, but it's something like he doesn't talk about manifesting. How does he say it? It's basically like, no matter how great I'm going to say manifesting, but that's not what he says. It still takes a man and a woman in 9 months to make a baby. No matter how great you are at strategy, no matter how great you are at business, no matter how amazing your offer is, no matter how great you are at taking action, it still takes clarity on your offer and model. It still takes clarity on your goal. It still takes clarity on your strategy. It still takes consistent action and a certain amount of time to get results, to bring in sales. That is just the nature of business. And then you add in the mix of, things are always changing. That is the nature of business as well. It's not just right now, because it's 2025, things are changing quickly. I do think that is the case for multiple reasons. Just modern day for one of them, but it's also just we are just always evolving as humans in terms of what our needs are. But I think that makes business feel really challenging. I think this is one of the reasons I have a job. Yes, I'm great at strategy. Yes, I'm great at mindset, but sometimes it's also to help clients stay in from when they have that clarity and they start taking action to when they get the result, because it is in that gap phases where more brilliant businesses, more $1 million businesses go to die than anywhere else. And I don't mean to be so dramatic, but it is really and just truly, it is that gap period where I see so many people end up stopping and starting, or pivoting when they don't need to, or tweaking things that didn't need to be tweaked and accidentally breaking a strategy and sending themselves backwards and staying stuck in that gap for a really, really long, like, I mean, you can stay there for years and years instead of understanding, again, when to pick and stick, when to refine or tweak something, and when to pivot. I really think it's one of the, I obviously am not trying to downplay my coaching. I think I'm an excellent coach. I think there are lots of reasons I have a job, but I really do think holding clients in this and helping them understand what is true with their strategy and what they need to do is one of the reasons I have a job, because this is just something that is really challenging for you to see when you're in it. And again, I just want to preface this just for everyone, just to know no one makes them wrong. This is true for you at every stage of business. I have multi-six-figure clients who are scaling with new offers or in the middle of a launch right now, and this is a conversation we're having. They're kind of in that mid-launch hump period where they're like, do I need to burn everything down? This isn't working. I have clients who are creating evergreen funnels right now, and this is coming up. Just like I also have clients who are booking their first client ever, and this is coming up. Or I have a client who's, I have multiple clients that I'm supporting with ads, but I have one client who's working on her ads and optimizing them, and this is coming up, and she's been in business for years and she makes 6 figures plus. So again, just to say, this comes up all of the time, because in business things are always changing, and even if we have a solid strategy that we can rinse and repeat, we're often iterating, trying new things, or we have a launch or something like that. So I think that's just why it's such an important conversation for us to be having. So again, this is normal. You are not a bad business owner or doing something wrong if you find yourself in the gap period of business. That is just business. Like I don't wish I could be the person who says that's not true, because then I would just be lying. I think anybody who says that's not true is not necessarily lying, but they are omitting part of the story. I will not go down a rabbit hole there, but. And I think it's also just, no matter how long you've been in business, no matter how much money you're making, no matter how great you are at what you do, no matter how great you are at business, again, I just really want to normalize it. It is just really tough when you are in it to see the label from outside the jar. So again, my clients, seasoned clients who have been in business, I have one client who comes to mind. I think they've been in business for 15 or 20 years at this point. They make at this point, they've scaled. We've worked together for 5 years. They've scaled their business to the 500K to 700K mark per year. Right? They're really seasoned, and they just messaged me today how much they're struggling with something in their funnel, not because they don't know what they're doing, not because they're not good at business, not because of, but just because this is just the nature of business, and it is just particularly challenging when you're in it to be able to see the forest for the trees. It is just so much easier for me to see this for clients because I'm on the outside looking in. Yes, I have the vantage point of lots of clients and experience and all of that, but part of it is simply I'm just not in it. And so I mean, sometimes we just also have an emotional charge around things. So I just want to preface that because I think it's so easy for us when we're in business to get frustrated or we're not getting the results we want to make ourselves wrong. And that just spins us out even more, as opposed to how do we get to neutral and see this is just what it means to be a CEO and business owner. When we can see that and put on our CEO hat and be more neutral, it's why I'm always talking about don't make yourself wrong. It's not because I want to be, I mean, yes, I want to rah-rah you, but it is more that I want to help you get to neutral because it is just really challenging to look at our business through a neutral, and to be able to discern the right problem to solve and to get results when we're not neutral. When we're jacked up, in any direction, honestly, when we're overly excited, it's also, I'm really excited about something right now. And I messaged my coach, I'm like, okay, I'm glad that you're excited for me, but also like, I need to like come down a little bit before I make decisions because that's like, I don't really want to make a decision from either Heighten's place. Okay. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole though, because I've got a lot I want to cover here. I'm going to pull up my notes to try to keep me on track because last week I had a lot to share as well. We went long. I'm going to try not to do that to you this week. So let's just talk a little bit mindset here since we're talking about that, and then we'll talk about the 3 core things I want to invite you to look at. So I mentioned this at the beginning of the live stream. I think what is really important to acknowledge, the reason the gap phase is challenging is, yes, you've identified the goal. Yes, you've gotten clarity on your strategy, and now you're consistently showing up for it and iterating and taking action. And so it feels like I am taking a lot of action. I am busy. I am doing the thing. I am working the strategy. And I think that can be very confusing to our brain. And what I think is important to understand is there is a big difference between working the strategy and working the strategy well. And I hate to say that. This is the place where I hate to say that, but it's just so true. I see this at the gym a lot. I go to it's called Alpha. It's an Olympic lifting type class. And there is there's a strategy we follow every week. It's designed. It's all about progressive overload. This is more information than you need, but I have a point here just to help land the plane on this concept. And what I see is you can show up consistently to that class and you can work hard, right? You can tire yourself out. You can feel like you're working the plan and you cannot see any gains or any strength. My goal is to gain some muscle. So you cannot see any gains. And it can be really frustrating. It can be really easy to be like, well, this plan doesn't work. This strategy doesn't work. Like, this is stupid. Like, I've been going for 4 months. There's someone who comes to mind who I think is wonderful, and I see her working so hard, and I don't think she's making a ton of gains. And I'm sure there's a part of her brain that's like, I don't understand why I'm not making any gains. And what I also notice is there's a difference between showing up to that class and working hard versus showing up to that class and working the strategy appropriately. There are certain things in terms of your form, and I'll just use a squat as an example. I think we all know what a squat is. I know even for myself, and I'm definitely seeing gains, the coach can come around and tell me to go 3 inches lower in my squat, and that alone is going to make a really big difference in my muscle gains. Or she can tell me, you've been lifting the same amount for X number of weeks, you need to increase even by 2.5 pounds. That's going to make a difference. Or for any of you who've taken bar Pilates, I think it's similar there, where my instructor can come around and say, tilt your pelvis by literally like a degree or two. Instead, I'm like, oh, now I'm quivering and I feel this. Whereas before I could just like roll through this movement and think this is super easy. And that's the big difference here. So the point is not that your strategy needs to feel hard, like a workout. But the point here is sometimes we're showing up consistently and we feel like we're working the strategy and we feel like we're working hard. But there's a really big difference between that and essentially working smarter and working the strategy well, so to say. And so this is, I think, where we can get ourselves really tripped up. But most of us as humans don't like to think, well, it's me, right? Like, I'm not working the strategy, right? Like, we just see the effort we're putting in. It's a really hard disconnect there. And so the easier and more logical thing for our brain to do, and for what most of us want to do, and this is not calling anyone out, this is all of us, I am human too, I like to do this as well, is we want to put a blame outside of ourselves. And so it is easiest to blame a strategy. It would be easiest for me to blame my coach at the class I take if I wasn't getting stronger or if I wasn't meeting my goals there, right? It is just easier for us to do that, especially when we are so connected to and aware that, hey, I have a goal and I'm showing up consistently. And so just to normalize that is basically how we work as humans. And if we don't have awareness around that, it is just pretty much by default what a lot of us are going to do. And so there's no shame in that. I think about this all the time when people project on me or clients project on me or they want to blame something else. And I don't take that personally. I don't get it upset. I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, that's what we do. Like, that is just so normal and human. And we want to keep coming back to how can we see this as a normal human thing, but it's not the most effective and it doesn't really get us the results we want. And so when we can notice that and when we can say, hey, maybe we need to actually take a step back and see, maybe it is the strategy, right? Maybe it is the coach. Like, I think that can sometimes be the case, but we actually need to step back and take a look at a couple of things before we decide that's the case. Even if it feels like we've been working really, really hard or showing up consistently, we can set ourselves up for success. Because if we use the lifting example there, right? Maybe it is I'm in the wrong class. Maybe it is I'm using the wrong strategy. Maybe it is that the coach isn't giving me the right feedback. Chances are, given that strategy has been pretty tested and proven and so many people have gone through it and that coach is really excellent, has done a lot of things. Probably not the case. And so then maybe it's that the way in which I'm executing this strategy, maybe there's something else going on that I want to pay attention to. And so, I mean, I hope that's helpful there. But I think that's just a helpful thing for us to remember when we're looking at things, so that we can again come back to neutral, not to put blame, not to shift the blame from outside to ourselves. Please, let's not do that. Neutrality is in the middle, right? I find for clients, they tend to swing one of two ways, right? Either they want to project and blame outwards, or it's almost like an inward projection. This is my personal pattern. So again, literally not calling people out to do this as well. My pattern is to shift blame inward. Neither is helpful. We want to get to neutral. But again, this is important because otherwise what we do is we pull the plug too early on a strategy. I stop lifting heavy because I decide it doesn't work, or because the coach doesn't work, or whatever that is, and I never get my gains. And then I think it's just because this doesn't work for me. Or we start tweaking a lot of things and changing a lot of things before there's enough data, or shifting so many things that it's really hard for us to know what's working, right? So if that were we're using the weightlifting thing, right? I start doing all of these different things, doing all of these different workouts, and then it's really tough before either I've been doing this long enough to get data, or all of that input is just going to make it really hard for me to know if I do see gains, what's actually contributing to the gain. And I think this is also when we start to jump around, like we stop and start and just start chasing shiny objects, right? Like this would be like, okay, this class doesn't work for me. I'm going to take a different class. I'm going to try a different workout. I'm going to try something different. And again, we're going to talk about there is a time and a place for that, but we're going to talk about when that is. In general, though, it's really hard to gain traction in anything if we're always jumping around and starting over somewhere else new. I know I've talked about that a lot, but it is the cycle I see happen so often in business that can keep us from, it can keep you from muscle gains working out. It can keep you from sales and revenue gains in business. It's this, I'm either constantly tweaking or I'm constantly starting something new. I get this false sense of productivity and busyness because of that. I don't see the result I want. So I decide this isn't working. So I start the cycle all over again with something new. I get a false sense of productivity because I'm really busy and doing something. I keep tweaking that. Like that doesn't, or like I'm jumping around from that. Like that doesn't work. I hit another ceiling plateau and I just start over. And so we can just complete the cycle over and over again where we're just hitting a certain level of growth. I feel like I say this on almost every live stream, but I say so because it's just so important. And because I see this so often with clients, and it is something I'm just constantly coaching around to keep people, to keep my clients focused. And I just see in my own business, one of the reasons I think we have great results and such sustainable results, we're about to cross 1.8 million in the last 6.5 years from one-on-one alone. I think one of the reasons for that is, I mean, yes, I have a great strategy, but my business could not be more simple. This was also something I was messaging my coach, and like, I was like, I'm so proud of how simple my business is. But part of it is I have literally been executing the same strategy for 6-7 years, not just the same offer, but the same strategy for so long, as opposed to jumping around. And I really and truly think that is one of the like secrets in air quotes to our sustainability. Okay, so let's talk about when we are in that gap phase and we feel like we're not getting results, how to know what your strategy actually needs. And those three, like, do you actually need to pick something different? Do you actually need to tweak? Do we actually need to refine something? Do we need to pivot? The three things I would be looking at. So this is what I'm looking at with clients. Like there's three things you might need if your strategy isn't converting yet that would actually give us a sign that we probably need to stay in it before we start messing with it. And just let me know if you have questions around this. Okay, the first one is really basic here. And these are not necessarily things you haven't heard before, but hopefully this is helpful to have it spelled out. First one is more time. It's the Warren Buffett quote I said earlier. Your results are going to lag behind your action. I often think about this in my own business. Whatever I'm seeing in my business today is often not the result of what I did yesterday or what I did today. It is often the result of what I did, look, maybe a couple of weeks ago. Usually it's more like a month ago, 3 months ago, sometimes 6 months ago, right? Results do lag behind effort, especially, I mean, this is the same using the weight lifting, the strength gains example. What I lift today probably doesn't mean that tomorrow I'm going to see the results. Like the results I'm seeing today are usually cumulative and compounding, but usually from what I started doing a couple weeks ago, months ago. Not to say that what you're doing today doesn't matter, but I think sometimes we forget that sometimes we just need more time with our strategy. So when that's the case, sometimes what I'm looking at with clients is we simply need more touch points before a result. I think we just forget how many touch points are necessary for a sale. Yes, there are people talking about how they have people come in and you shouldn't need to post a lot and you shouldn't need to nurture people a ton, and like you can just post something and that will bring in clients. And I think there's that's sexy marketing, but I do think there's just a lot of nuance to that, because I think there's an element of truth. But I think what we need to remember is, if you have an offer that is solving a really immediate pain point and a really immediate fire that people need to put out, yes, there is an element of truth that you're going to need fewer touch points, especially if there's a low level of trust needed to be able to invest in whatever that is, especially if it's lower ticket or something like that. The higher ticket your offer doesn't mean people can't jump right into it, but generally speaking, the higher ticket your offer, the more touch points someone is going to need, the more trust someone is going to need. Similarly, the less of an immediate pain point or fire that someone needs to put out right now. So, for example, if, knock on wood, hopefully this doesn't happen, but let's just say my plumbing, this happened actually a couple months ago. Our bathroom sink was leaking, all the pipes underneath. I think we used too much Drano or something, but we basically created a hole in one of our pipes and like all the water was leaking underneath everything in the bathroom. That is a pretty immediate pain point, right? I don't need 3 months of touch points to hire a plumber or to hire someone to fix that. I need to look and see what touch point, like what marketing seems like the most trustworthy person, or do I have a referral? In our case, we could just call, we have someone in the building, but that is an immediate need and an immediate pain point. I need to solve for that right away. That is going to be a very different customer journey. But let's just say I wanted to redesign my bathroom and I wanted to update it and make it, like aesthetically more appealing. That is not an immediate pain point, and that is a much higher ticket offer. I'm probably going to need to look around. I'm probably going to get some inspiration on Pinterest. I'm probably going to need more touch points. Maybe I'm someone who's really impulsive and I just pick the first person, or like meet the first person and like them, but I'm probably still going to need more touch points there. Anyway, not to go too far down a rabbit hole, but I think the whole idea of like you're doing something wrong if you're not getting people DMing you from one reel and you shouldn't need to nurture people is both true and false. In some cases that is true, and in other cases that literally doesn't make sense. And so I think there's no nuance with that, but I think we have to understand that in general, most people are going to have a customer journey, and the higher ticket, the more touch points and the longer the customer journey. And long customer journey doesn't necessarily have to mean days, months, years. I have a higher ticket offer. I can have someone come into my world and book a consultation and hire me within a day or two. I mean, depending on availability on my calendar, obviously, and availability on my roster, but I've definitely had that happen before. But I think even that is a little confusing, because that omits the point of, but that's usually then someone where they have an immediate need, they're ready to hire someone, and they might find me for the first time, but they can go through a series of touch points. Let's say they find me on Instagram. We delete them after a certain point, but I have who knows how many at this point, mini bite-sized biz lessons. They can look at my reels, but those are later touch points. They could go to my website. I have hundreds and hundreds of podcasts and live streams. They could sign up for one of my master classes. There's so much they could do. So even if they booked a call with me the following day, let's say I had that availability, they hired me right away, they could have spent hours in my world getting to know me. And so again, I've heard so many different, it used to be people need 7 touch points before making a sale. I've heard it's now up to like 40 to 50 micro touch points. I don't actually know what the number is. I think these numbers get thrown around. The point here is most people are going to need multiple touch points with us, with our brand, with our offer to build a relationship, especially when there's a trust recession in our industry, but also when people have a lack of trust internally, or when it's a higher ticket offer. Higher ticket or higher commitment in terms of timeline. So that's the first piece there. It is time. If your strategy isn't converting yet, it might just need more time, and that's something to look at. I'm just seeing if I had any. Oh, I made myself a note that most people, what I see is most people underestimate the consistency and time it takes and the length of their customer journey and how many touch points are needed. I think, and that is why marketing that speaks to you shouldn't need to do that is really sexy. Yes, we want to cut that down. I'm happy to nurture someone for 5 years before they hire me. Like, I'm playing the long game, and I also want a funnel and messaging and marketing and sales that someone can come into my world and be ready to hire me a day or two later, right? I want room for both, but I think most of us are expecting the 1 to 2 day thing and forgetting, even with that timeline of a conversion happening in a day or two, there are still multiple touch points within that. Okay, so the second thing here, why your strategy might not converting yet, that might not mean there's anything wrong, but you might just need more clarity and data. So this is the rule, the reference, or like the general rule I give my clients, is that unless we've had 100 people go through your funnel, we don't have enough data to have clarity to really discern if something is working or not, to even know if we need to make adjustments or tweaks. I have quite a few clients that I'm supporting with funnels for like evergreen funnels or for ad funnels, and I know, I'm sure they would all be like, yep, this is so annoying because you say this to me, who will like come to me and be like, hey, this isn't working, I want to change X, Y, and Z. Like, how many people have gone through this? And they're like, 15. Like, yeah, no, like we need to have more people come through this, or we're just going to start fucking with things that might not even be broken. And we're going to feel so good because we like found these things to tweak, and we could just keep ourselves busy and stuck in this loop forever, as opposed to we actually need to have enough data here to see where to really even get clarity and to see, is this working, is this not working. The other thing with data and with clarity that I think is just, I just find is fascinating, and I find this is just Alyssa says, love this topic. Oh, nice to see you here, Alyssa. So glad you're here. So funny, Facebook stopped showing me who's live with me. So like half the time I think I'm not talking to anybody, and then I see comments. So I'm glad to see you here. Let me know if you have questions. And y'all, I'm like fighting a cold, so I'm totally fine. I don't know if it's allergies or cold, but I'm just noticing a little nasal sounding. Anyway, the other thing I see happen quite a bit, and this is really important to know because I've coached clients through this so they haven't sabotaged their funnels, but I have just seen how many clients of mine were about to scrap a really great strategy or a really great funnel because they thought that it sucked and it wasn't performing. And when we took a look at what was going on, and when we took a look at their numbers, they were actually hitting industry benchmarks. Some of them were overperforming. And it's just because they weren't getting the results they wanted or hitting their personal expectations or what they thought they should do or what someone on the internet said you were supposed to do. They thought they were doing something wrong or their strategy sucked. And we actually take a look. This is where like data can be really valuable. When we actually took a look at this, what the numbers say is, oh, actually you're outperforming what we would expect. You just need more people to go through your funnel, right? You just need more traffic. But I think that's why it's so, like, why we need to see, sometimes you just need more data and more clarity, not there's something wrong with your strategy. And when you can have that, then you can solve for the right problem. When that's the case, it's very easy to see, oh, we don't need to go tweaking everything, which would probably break the strategy, right? We don't need to say the strategy doesn't work, let's go do something else. Actually, this is working and performing above average, above what we expect. What that means is we just need to put more people through it, which is a very different problem to solve for. This is why, not to pat myself on the back, but this is why coaching I think is invaluable, because I think, again, it's just so hard for us to see this when we're in this. So often for clients, I just was having a conversation about this with another client about something unrelated, but more about team. And I reflected something to her. She's like, oh my gosh. She's like, that's just so, like, it was just so normalizing. She thought she was doing things wrong. I'm like, no, that's just pretty much how this goes. I think sometimes my job is just to help clients see what they are doing is right and normal, because so often we are, again, when we're talking about that blame outward or inward, we're so quick to blame. A lot of my clients are very quick to blame themselves or to think they're doing something wrong or to compare against expectations. And that is when we start breaking things that are actually working. That's also when we start solving the wrong problem. Okay, so the third thing here that might be going on, that might mean that like the reason something might not be converting, that doesn't mean your strategy isn't working, is you might just need more testing or more learning and refinement. So this is really when we want to start taking strategic micro shifts and refinements versus throwing the whole thing out or starting something new. I think this one is kind of a challenging, tough pill to swallow for lots of reasons. I'm trying to think of where I want to start with this. I think one of the things that is my job as a coach to remind clients that is not fun for any of us to hear is sometimes we are just in a learning curve. And a learning curve does not mean you are not good enough. It does not mean you are not a good business owner. It doesn't mean you're not good at what you do. It just means you're in a learning curve. And all of us are going to be in various learning curves at various times. And also, the journey of business has always been in a learning curve, especially since the industry, the market, business will always be changing. And so we're kind of always learning, adapting with that. And I think just for, at least for my people, high achievers, recovering perfectionists, people who can put a lot of pressure on themselves to hit really big goals, really big expectations, really quickly, to be like the unicorn of everything. Excuse me. Suddenly very congested, but I think this can be a really tough one to hear. I was telling one of my clients this the other day. I was like, I call this the curse of the gifted person, which I think is a book that talks about not what I'm talking about here. So if there is a book, I haven't read it. That's not what I'm referencing. But this is more. I call this the curse of the gifted person, meaning if you're someone who is high achieving and talented and gifted, and one of those people, a lot of my clients are the kind of people who you're just generally like you're good at figuring things out, you're good at making results happen, you're good at going after things, you're good at you're probably one of those people that like you excel at a lot of what you do, which is excellent. But the curse of that means you've probably never had to try that hard. This is going to make me sound like such an asshole, but I remember in school, I tested gifted, right? I have a near genius level IQ, like yay, that's exciting and all that. But what it also meant is I never learned how to learn. I didn't learn how to study. Like that sounds amazing and all that. Like, I mean, thanks to my parents, like I have nothing to do with that. Like, yes, that's great. And it in many ways hindered me so much because I coasted through school getting great grades for so long because I barely had to try. And then I hit a point where I got to college and I wanted to graduate early and I was taking some really challenging classes and I was taking things where it's like you couldn't just like kind of coast by picking things up quickly. You actually had to like try. And I had never learned how to learn. I had never learned how to study. I was like, oh, wait, what is this thing? And I am someone who likes a good challenge, so I dug in and figured that out. And I can see how in other areas of my life, I probably sabotage myself. Like certain sports where it's like, if it didn't come instantly, naturally, I was like, well, that must just mean there's something wrong with me or I shouldn't do this, as opposed to saying, no, that just means you're in a learning curve and you haven't learned how to learn. You haven't learned how to practice. You haven't mastered this thing yet. I reflect this here because I see that through so many of my clients. And I'm sure for many of you as well, it's such a blessing to be gifted, to be talented, to be great at what you do. It is such, I think, a bit of a curse of the gifted person, of the talented person, of the high achiever as well, because oftentimes it means we expect ourselves to get everything right the first time around, to basically have our learning curve be like a day, or like I read something once and I pick it up. Someone tells me something once, I pick it up. I implement something once, I like nail it and crush it and get the biggest results ever. And I am here for that. But I actually think in many ways, even though I'm here for that, I think that can be so detrimental because also if that's the case, we don't actually know what creates those results. It almost feels like a fluke. We don't actually have an understanding or a grasp or a learning of what goes into that. And so a lot of times so this is very long, I'm off on a tangent here, but hopefully this is resonating with y'all. And y'all have to let me know if any of you land with that, or if you're just like, F you, Kim. That just feels like an obnoxious way to think about this. But I think the truth is, and what I have to reflect to clients a lot is, it's not that your strategy isn't working. It's not that your business isn't working. It's that we're in a learning curve. It's that we still have to master something. It's that you've never written copy in this way before. And it's not that you suck at writing. It's that you are in a learning curve of how to write copy. It's, not that your strategy on Instagram isn't working. It's that you have basically just been posting instead of studying the platform and studying what works and what doesn't work, and in a learning curve and mastering how to create content for Instagram. It's not that your strategy for launching isn't working. It's that you've never launched before and you've never done a webinar before, and or you've never written sales emails before, and we're in a learning curve of not just what we talked about before, right? The timeline that it takes for that to work in a customer journey, or getting enough data and clarity for what we need to optimize or what is already optimized. But sometimes it is simply that we are in a learning curve, and we just need to master a skill. And that is, I started Reels, it's probably 2 years now, but I'd already been in business for 7 years. I'd had this group, grown it to, we actually deleted like 3,000 people. So I think we had even more people at one point, like got this working, and then started on Instagram. Like I had to go humble myself and be a beginner again. And it's not that my Instagram strategy wasn't working. It's not that Instagram didn't work. It's not that the algorithm hated me. It's that I had never done that before, and I was in a learning curve around that. So I think, and I'm always going to be probably in a learning curve with that, because it's not my main priority or focus for our business, but also because things change on there so often. And I think the big difference is going back to that neutral conversation. Instead of me blaming my strategy or blaming Instagram or blaming myself and saying I must suck or there's something wrong with me, I just see that really neutrally. I was like, oh, well, that's just because I will probably always be in mastery of this, and this is something I'm in a learning curve with. I think I'm really good at it, and things have shifted. I need to figure that out again. So that's a long-winded way there of saying that I really think so often we have to be, this is why neutrality, this is why getting coaching is so invaluable. We have to have the kind of support or be able to see for ourselves, is it really that our strategy isn't working, or is it that we haven't given it enough time? Is it really that our strategy isn't working, or is it that we don't have enough data to get clarity on what's going on there? Is it really, or like actually our numbers are outperforming and we have a different problem to solve, like traffic, or an offer misfit, or something on the back end of our sales process? Is it really that our strategy isn't working, or is the truth that maybe we're a beginner, or that like we're good at this, but that the standards have risen in the online space and we have an opportunity to get a little bit better or to master, and not like you aren't good enough, but just to be in a bit more mastery here, like that there's a new skill set. Maybe we've never run ads before. Just coaching a client around this. Ads are a skill set, and so it is. The high achiever's brain thinks the first time I run them, the first time I should crush them, when it's probably going to be an iterative process anyway. I mean, ads are an iterative process, and also it's a skill set to learn and master that you're going to get better at with over time. I would say with the testing and learning refinement piece, the other piece there is sometimes it's like, is your strategy working, or do we look at the clarity in data, and does it actually just need a small micro tweak? It is fascinating to me how sometimes just changing a couple of lines on a landing page. I had this couple masterclasses ago that we ran ads to. We weren't getting this is why knowing your numbers is so helpful. I wasn't getting the normal numbers we're used to. I looked at the landing page and I was like, oh, I think this messaging is great. Clearly, it is not landing with my people as well. I changed, I think, one line on my tagline and increased our conversion rate by, I think it was 15% on the landing page. One line on my landing page. Like, that's it, right? It's not because my strategy didn't work. It's not because masterclasses don't work. It's not because my ads weren't working. It's because it's not because I was in a learning curve, right? It was just because I needed to make a micro shift. Sometimes it's messaging, sometimes it's positioning, sometimes it's something else. So I'm gonna move on because I've gone long again. I hope, I want to like give you all so much. I hope this is not too in-depth here. Y'all let me know if this is valuable for you. But I will just really quickly put this in a bow. So knowing those are the 3 things to look at, how do we know when we need to refine, when we need to pivot, or when we need to stay the course? I think just remembering a refinement is something like adjusting the messaging or the positioning, like I just talked about on a landing page. A pivot is changing your entire offer, changing your entire strategy, like doing a complete change on who your audience is or what your brand messaging is, versus I update my messaging all the time, but they're micro refinements or tweaks. And then staying the course is obviously being fully committed to a strategy and consistent. I would say without any major changes, but like still being open and available for those tweaks. But it is being fully committed to play full out. It's not sort of like, I'm just going to see how this goes, which is at 1 foot, 1 foot out. It's that person in the lifting class who's like, I'm doing this, but like I'm not actually like going down all the way into the squat or lifting heavy. So here are just a couple of things you can think about. If you're looking at your strategy, like, I'm not getting the conversions I want. Is this working? Is this not? What do I do? Do I refine? Do I pivot? Do I stay the course? What I would say is, if you have less than 100 people who have gone through your funnel or who have seen your landing page, and or it's been less than 90 days of consistently executing your strategy and consistently executing your strategy where you're not in a learning curve, and where you're not in a big mindset funk the whole time saying, I suck, which is, I know a lot of nuance there, but like where we're executing something where it's like, I actually kind of know what I'm doing here. Then if it is, so less than 100 people, less than 90 days, general rule of thumb, I would say, is to stay the course and to be consistent until you get more data, and then to let the data tell you what is actually going on, right? So less than 100 people, less than 90 days, general rule of thumb. It does not mean, if I have a client in a launch right now, we're looking at things in the middle of the launch, it doesn't mean you can't make micro shifts. This is general rule of thumb. I think maybe less in the timeline. I would just say the 100 people, if they haven't gone through that, that's probably a helpful thing. If you've done what we just talked about there, more than 100 people have gone through this, it's been over 90 days, then we want to look at what your data actually tells you and check and see if you are within benchmarks or not. So often, I cannot stress this enough, so often when clients are like, this sucks, it's not working, and we look at their numbers, it does not suck. It is working. Their numbers are above average. It is just the disconnect between our personal expectations or our own personal discomfort, right? It is uncomfortable when we are waiting for a result, or when we want something in our business, or when we're not meeting our own expectations. I am here for the big goals, right? But when that, what we perceive should be happening is not what is happening, that can seem like data for us, as opposed to what is actually normal in your industry for what we are doing here. I think, is it Denise Duffield-Thomas? Denise Duffield-Thomas, the Lucky Bitch Money Coach. She's made millions and millions of dollars from her course, and she's done content on this in the past. I haven't listened to her in a while, but I remember years ago she was talking about her launches, and like, they did all these new launch strategies and all these ads and all of these things, and at the end of the day, their conversion rate was still 1 to 3%. That's what it was before. And I just reflect that because most conversion rates for a launch are 1 to 3%, especially when you're getting to the bigger numbers. Do I have clients who are converting at 10% and above? Yes. Are they outliers? Yes. Are there reasons for that? Yes. And oftentimes it's also because they have a smaller audience, or it's a smaller, more intimate program. As we get into larger audience size, bigger programs, like courses, 1 to 3% conversion rate is actually really good. Denise Duffield-Thomas, who's a gazillionaire, multimillionaire, right, who had invested in, she spent all of this money in all of these different things, she still landed with 1 to 3% conversion rate. So I say that because sometimes we think I should have a 50% conversion rate, and not to say there aren't cases where that can't happen, but if you also have a funnel you've built out and we look at it and it's like, oh, but it's converting. I just talked about this with a client yesterday. She had a 3% conversion rate for her launch. I'm like, you killed it. It's just in our brain. We're like, 3% is killing it. 3% is killing it. So again, if we've now had 100 people go through the funnel, it's been the 90 days, or it's been the time that makes sense for your customer journey. Take a look at the data, take a look at those benchmarks. And then specifically, then what I would say is, if your benchmarks aren't lining up, I would specifically look at where you're seeing a dip in those benchmarks. And that's your opportunity to refine or for mastery. In general, when I'm looking at this with clients, I want to see where the first dip in a metric is, because that is the first opportunity, because not enough people are getting to the back end of the funnel, right? I want to look for the first kink in the hose of a funnel. So when we're looking at the data together, then I want to be mindful to look at the data and the metrics that actually matter. Sometimes we get really in the weeds looking at things that aren't actually what move the needle forward. A client and I were talking about this yesterday. She just finished a launch, and she was convinced that like her engagement on social media like needed to work, and like, yeah, her engagement was down. She was also just in a launch selling nonstop. But one of the things we were talking about, I'm like, it's not that here for it. We can talk about how to have your content create more engagement, but I also want you to look at where your sales came from and what are the metrics that are like most important for us to be focusing on. Your engagement on Instagram like has so little to do with what is actually driving all of the sales you've had in the last 5 years of your business. That might not be the case for someone else, but for her specifically, because we've worked together for 5 years, so I know this in her business. And so this is where it's like we want to be really mindful of looking at metrics. Again, it's so easy for our brains to just look at this thing isn't good, I need to go fix this, as opposed to what are the data points, what are the metrics that are actually driving those sales. And then again, I would look at the first dip after all the other things we just talked about. And then that's going to be usually the place to look at, is this either a place for me to refine or a place for me to create some mastery, or both? Sometimes it's both. Okay, so when you've done all of that and you're still not seeing results, right, and you've given it time and you've tested and you've iterated and you've given time for the customer journey, then I would say we're starting to get feedback that maybe there's a mismatch between your offer and your audience. Maybe there's a mismatch with your overall messaging. Maybe there's a mismatch, or maybe your offer isn't validated, right? And so we need some information there. Maybe there's a mindset thing and you don't actually want to sell the thing, or you don't actually want clients, or there's something in that doesn't feel in alignment for you. If those things are happening, right, and I think these are all maybes, so we have to look at, is this actually true? I would say if some of those things are coming to play, then it could be time for a strategic pivot, right? Or if just overall, using myself as an example, I had been posting to Facebook in this group for however 6 years, 7 years. This group was working like a well-oiled machine, and I also have an Instagram account. I always talk about picking and sticking and going all into one platform, but this group works like a well-oiled machine, right? I had this working, it was growing, and I really had a desire to start to grow on Instagram and to master Reels. So that was a very neutral reason for a pivot. It wasn't because this strategy wasn't working. It's like when I stopped my podcast, it wasn't that strategy wasn't working. That strategy was working. I just looked more at other reasons in terms of where do I want my time to go? How does this fit into my strategy? Does this actually make sense for me to have both a live stream and a podcast? I could open up a spot for another client. I have an all one-on-one business, so my time is, it's extra important for me to be really mindful of where I'm allocating my time, right? There were a lot of other reasons there. It was very neutral, and it was still very strategic, but it wasn't because, oh, my strategy is not working, let me go jump and do something else. It was, my strategy is actually working. There are some alignment reasons, some efficiency reasons for me to make a pivot. So again, if you've looked at all the other things and you still aren't seeing, like, you're truly not seeing results, as opposed to like what those expectations are in our head, again, then I would just be looking at what kind of feedback are you getting? Can you even get some feedback and do some, I just had a client do this, do some market research to see, is there a mismatch between your offer and your audience? Check in, has your offer been validated? Check in with your messaging. That's often, messaging and positioning is often a big part of things. And then if not, check in and see, is there either a misalignment there for you, or a very neutral reason you might want to make a pivot. That is time to make a pivot. What I suggest for clients, and this will be kind of my last, we're just gonna make this a little bit longer because I want to share these last pieces. Hopefully this is helpful for you. What I suggest for clients when they're making a pivot is, unless something is just so unaligned where you are just fucking miserable doing the thing, you're like, I tried this and like this is just not for me, that's a different reason, right? Like then it's time to definitely make a switch. Unless that's the case, I really suggest clients continue with their current strategy until they have whatever their pivoted strategy, until that is actually working and starting to bring in results. The reason for that is so often the grass looks greener and it isn't. And sometimes we really do need that pivot, but sometimes we make that pivot and we're like, oh, it's just the same, and that was actually working better than I thought. But the other reason for that is that keeps at least some results coming in while you're working something else, because it takes, going back to time, it also just takes time to ideate, to get clarity, to iterate, to get that data, right, to refine, to get something else working for us. And so I'll just use, I think ads are actually a great example for this. If I'll use myself as an example. If I'm running an ad campaign and it's good, but I want to test something to have a better result, I'm going to keep, even to say if like it wasn't that great, but it was just kind of good and it was bringing in like a high cost per lead, I'm going to keep that ad set running while I test something else, right? until that new test is performing better, then I'll shut that old ad set off. But in the meantime, I don't want to shut off what's still bringing in some results, even if they're not optimal or the best or like the thing I want. I'm not going to shut that off until something else is working better. And so with a pivot, I think, again, unless something is just making you miserable or there's another strategic reason to stop it, in general, I would keep something going so you're still getting some of those results while you're building out the other thing, because again, it does just take time. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have a question. I will close with one last thought because I promised this, and then I will then end this out. And then next week I promise I will actually try to have a shorter live stream. They'll let me know. Maybe I'll like the longer ones. I know last week I was talking about the importance of being concise, and I'm not walking my talk here. So y'all can give me some feedback as well, though, if you like them a little bit longer and in depth. The last piece I just wanted to close on here, though, to reiterate, is there just is a cost in our business whenever we start something new, whenever we stop and start, and whenever we pivot. It does not mean it has to be a bad cost, right? Expenses are necessary in business. I have so many expenses in business. Every time I test something, there is an expense. Starting a business is all about expenses, right? And sometimes we have to burn some money, so to say, to test something and to get that data. And ideally, most of what we're investing in our business is giving us an ROI. But just to normalize that, I think that's just very normal in business. There are just expenses we all accrue. Like, that is just the nature of business. But when there is, in terms of an expense, I think it's just important to see when we think our strategy isn't working and we stop and start and we pivot and we do something new, there is a cost associated with that. There is a time cost associated with that. There is a often sales cost associated with that. There can often be a literal expense associated with that. When you run the same strategy, not only do you get better at it over time and does it work better for you, but your expenses tend to go down. If I think about what it costs myself and my team to run our strategy, it actually costs us less now, even though we're running the same strategy, than it did years ago, because we have all gotten better. We've worked that process and refined. We've all gotten better at iterating on it, especially when you have a team. It takes time, your time and your team's time, and it takes money and energy with every new funnel, with every new offer, with every time you need to rebuild a landing page, every time you need to rewrite copy, every time you're doing something new, there is just an expense that is incurred. With this, you can also sometimes lose some momentum, right? If we're starting something new, we have to rebuild momentum. You can lose some clarity, you can lose some data, because right, we're creating a whole new data set that we need to get. And so when we are constantly, this isn't working well enough, let me try something else, let me try something else, let me try something else, as opposed to staying within the same strategy and iterating and refining and testing things within that, or the same offer. We can easily build our business on the idea of starting something. I am always a business to starting something new as opposed to scaling, right? If we are always starting something, we cannot scale. You can only scale when we stick with something, right? Scaling is to take something that is already there and we build upon it. We make it essentially more efficient and we make it more profitable. And again, I said this earlier, but you can just stay in that cycle and trick yourself into thinking you are busy and productive and doing great work and making great strategic decisions. And because it feels like it scratches such an itch, and our brain loves to find problems and to solve them. It feels so good. We're like, I found a problem and I solved it by doing something new. I am someone, like, I have to be so mindful of sitting on my hands. I am someone, the first year of my business, I'm pretty sure this is why my growth was so slow my first year of my business. I was just trying to do all the things and starting all the things and trying to learn all the things and not realizing how expensive that is and how much that slows momentum. The other thing here is when we do this, we also create a time lag with our audience. Every time we do something new, right, there is time for it takes our audience time to catch up. Whether that is literally catch up to follow us in new messaging or with a new offer or into a new strategy, or if we're on a new platform to grow that audience. So I think just remember there is an expense in that time lag with our audience and the time lag for our audience to catch up as well. And then the last piece here, just in terms of the expense, I will just say with stopping and starting and jumping around and chasing shiny object syndrome, what this can do is it can really create a pattern of avoiding discomfort and the discomfort that comes with being in mastery in your business. perfection is not, none of us are perfect. Perfection is not required. Mastery more than ever, I think really is required to scale. I think you could have a business still in 2025. I think you could probably even take it to 6 figures without that. But I genuinely believe if you want to scale your business above 6 figures at this point, especially if you want to scale to the 250K mark and above, we are just at a time where it asks us to be in mastery of what we are, our strategy, our offers, just of what we're doing. And again, not in perfection. And we will always be in mastery. But the expense of stopping and starting and always jumping around and chasing shiny objects, the expense of that is you will never be a mastery because you're always starting something. We're always in the learning curve. But really what I see is it creates this pattern of as soon as something gets uncomfortable and as soon as something feels hard, or as soon as I'm not getting what I want, or as soon as I have the discomfort that comes with mastery, because part of mastery is discomfort. I could have a whole live stream about mastery, but there's a whole actual process to mastery. They've studied this. Part of it is basically the discomfort is part of it, moving through that. And tapping out every time that happens to start over. And that, what we are essentially doing is robbing yourself the very thing that is required to scale. So I annoyingly share this with clients all the time. I'm sure my clients are like, thanks, Kim. But my husband and I talk about this all the time. We talk about this I'll use a workout example here, but our brain just looks for ways to tap out of discomfort. Our brain is wired to conserve calories. It is not wired for success. It is not wired to make lots of money. It is wired for comfort. It is wired for survival and safety. That's basically it. Our brain looks for ways to tap out of this. So the thing we think about is at the gym, where even if you have great form, this is where coaching is so invaluable. Even if my husband and I work out a lot, even if we think we have great form, we know what we're doing, if we're tired or just if we're human, our body, our brain and our body is just always going to look for the shortcut subconsciously for how to make it easier, which is why having someone come around and say, you've been lifting the same weight for months, you need to increase by 2.5 pounds, which sounds like nothing, but 2.5 pounds on 2 ends of an Olympic bar, y'all. Holy moly, it is wild how much that can add. When you're depending on what you're doing, or hey, your body basically subconsciously was just trying to make this easy, so you're in the wrong form. Tilt your pelvis in a little bit, or you need to actually stop arching your back, or put your shoulders back a little bit. Those small micro things, those small micro adjustments our body makes so that we can be comfortable, so that it can feel easier, because our body wants to tap out of that. It will always look for the path of least resistance and what is easier, which is why if we're not conscious of this, if we're not actively getting coached, if we're not actively getting support, if we're not actively paying attention to this ourselves, we will just always naturally default to that. Then if you added the layer of, oh my gosh, I'm human and I'm scared, or I don't want to get rejection, or I feel like I failed, or I don't want people to judge me, or, right? There's just even more of a reason for our brain to do that. Or I don't want to sit in the discomfort of if this doesn't work and I don't get the success I want, which I think is so often. Our brain will just look for ways to avoid that. And so this is why I think we just have to be so mindful of this. Is why this is such an important conversation when we're in that gap phase, to remember the gap phase is normal. It does not mean we want to be in the gap phase and not have results forever. And that, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That's not what I'm talking about here at all. Remember, we're talking about with the learning curve and the refinement and looking at your data. I am definitely not, that is what we were talking about earlier in terms of there's a difference between working your strategy and working it well. I am not suggesting don't just do the same thing forever, but we do have to be so mindful of both just kind of phony, or not phony things in, but just repetitively doing something without looking at the data, without looking for what the data is telling us and what changes we need to make and what we need to optimize, and also looking at where we just want to constantly stop and start, jump around, and how that, because we're trying to avoid discomfort, and how that both of those can sabotage our results. I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to share there on that thought. It'll come to me. Yeah, I think we've probably shared enough. If there was something important, I'll leave it in the comments. Oh, don't you hate when that happens? You're like, oh, I feel like there was a thing there. Well, it's fine. If it comes to me, again, I'll share it next week or something like that. But I think we have more than enough here. So the point here is I really hope that this is valuable for you. Pay attention to this. This is completely normal. It is normal for every business. You will constantly find yourself in new gap phases. That is part of the growth process. This is a great place to lean into your support. I really invite you to look at those three things to see, is your strategy not working, or is it the time? Is it that you need more clarity and data, or is it more that you're in a learning curve, or there's an opportunity for refinement? Really paying attention to what those metrics are for. Do you need to refine something? Do you need to sit on your hands? Or is it actually time for a pivot? And just remember that all of this takes time. It doesn't mean it has to be forever for a client to come through the door, right? Someone can meet you today and become a client tomorrow. We're not saying that everything has to be forever. And it is also normal to have customer journeys. It does take time to nurture and trust people. Again, it varies on someone's level of readiness, what their pain point is to your result, the ticket, how high a ticket your offer is, like all of these factors come into play. But I would just remember sales happen when we compound these actions over time, not when we're constantly starting over. I get stronger when I show up and incrementally increase that resistance. What is it? What do they call it? The word's not coming to me. But when I incrementally increase my resistance over time, right, that compounds, that makes me stronger. Not when I'm like, oh, well, this doesn't work, I'm going to try something different this week, I'm going to do this extra, like, not when I'm jumping around, when I stick to the plan and I incrementally increase that resistance over time. So sales are the same in your business. I hope that was valuable for you. I love you all so much. Quick reminder, if you have questions, to drop them, please tag me. If you found this valuable and you want support with taking a look at your strategy, whether it's mapping out a strategy to scale to your first 6 figures or to scale to your next 6 figures, you want to look at your current strategy and really take a look at where those opportunities are to refine, to up level, where, especially with the messaging and positioning, and just the overall holistic marketing strategy and sales process and funnel. Those are some of my zones of geniuses and what I support clients with. I would love to connect with you. I am fully booked with one-on-one clients until I think we might have an opening in November, December. So I am booking waitlist spots for that, but I do currently have week-long strategy intensives, and I'm opening up a month-long strategy intensive so that it's basically a month of coaching, so you can have more of that in-depth support. So I will drop a link for a free coaching consultation. If you're interested in that, I would love to connect with you. If you've listened this long, you get the dirt. I don't know that everyone will make it to the end of this live stream, but you get the dirt. I believe I will be making an announcement about raising my rates in the next couple of weeks. I have not done that in 4 or 5 years. Maybe 6 years. I have not raised my rates in my business in a very, very, very long time. We are quite overdue. So point being, if you are interested in one of those intensives or snagging one of those waitlist spots, you will get locked in at my current rates. When I raise those, I probably won't lock them in anymore just because of the level of demand I have. But I will be sure to share about that. If you're a current client of mine listening to this, do not worry. You are grandfathered in always for as long as we work together. So that will not affect you. But given my years of experience, my personal results, my client results, the level of demand I have, it is time for us to reassess that. So I will be making that announcement. So now is a great time to book that call. And then if you're curious about what my coaching is like and you're not necessarily ready to make that leap, I am taking applications for our free and recorded coaching sessions. I've already announced the coachees for this month. If you've applied, I have all of the rest of your applications on file. We will pick some more coachees for next month. I can only do a couple at a time for the next couple of months. So you are still being considered. I just only had so much availability, but that means you can still apply. I'm meeting and offering limited free coaching sessions, 1 or 2 per month, which we are recording, and I will share once we have those already in a private podcast feed so more people can benefit from that coaching because I think what one of us goes through personally is usually universal in the business space. So that is a way that we can together also give back to the industry or to our audience a little bit here. So if you're interested in that, I will drop a link for that below as well. I will still be collecting those, and again, we'll pick 1, maybe 2, probably just 1 next month. So please apply, and if you've already applied, you don't have to apply again. All right, I love you all so much. I know this was long. I will try to be more concise next week, but I hope this was valuable and helpful for you. Lots of love. Bye.